Hey everybody, Father Constantine Lazarakis here. Excited today to make Prosforo with you. For those of you who don't know, Prosforo is the offering bread that is made for every Divine Liturgy in the Orthodox Church. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the steps. One thing you're going to need is an apron because flour can get everywhere, and so you definitely want to cover up with your apron. I am wearing an apron of priestly black today, so we're excited about that. But you can wear any apron you have around the house. You are going to need a Prosforo seal. You're going to need 2 cake rounds, like these guys right here. You're going to need all-purpose flour. Any brand is fine. This is what we had on hand at church today. King Arthur, gold medal, whatever is fine. You're going to need a little bit of salt. You're going to need a little bit of yeast. Today I've got yeast in a big package, but the best thing is to get the little individual packets that you find at your grocery store. You're going to need a wooden spoon, and I like to use some non-stick spray for the rounds, so that just helps the bread come out of the pan. Some people don't like to use it. I recommend it. You're also going to need a sharp knife, which I don't have here, but we'll find one later. And that is pretty much everything you need. A mixing bowl, and that's it. So we'll go ahead and get started now with the recipe. And I completely forgot. Of course, you're going to need some warm water. Okay, so when we start making our Prosforo, the most important thing is that we ask God to bless the process, because it is an offering bread. We should always ask God to bless our food, but especially food that's going to be used in church and in the Eucharist. We want to make the sign of the cross. And there are different prayers that you can say, but I just like to say, O Heavenly King, O Comforter, O Spirit of Truth, present in all places and filling all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and dwell in us and cleanse us from every stain and save our souls, O gracious Lord. And then we start by putting the yeast and the salt. The measurements that you would use at home are all in the recipe and the description. We'll also link them to social media and our website. And like I said, I like to use the little individual packets. We didn't have those on hand. So I'm putting just a teaspoon of yeast. And then the salt is optional, but I like to use it. Some people opt out. But really it's just like a pinch of salt. And then you're going to add your warm water. You want it to be warm to the touch, not hot, but you should be able to feel that the water is warm. And again, all of the measurements are in the recipe below. I'm kind of eyeballing it today, but I've been doing it for a long, long time. So if you're at home, please do follow the recipe, especially if you're doing this for the first time. And then we like to let it sit for a few minutes. You can see that the bubbles are starting to form, but before you add your flour, you want to see that there are bubbles forming from the yeast, so that you know that your yeast has been activated. You don't need to wait too long, but you do want to know that your yeast has been activated. Then you're going to go ahead and add your flour. You're going to follow measurements in the recipe below. You want to get all of that flour, or as much as possible, dissolved into the water, yeast, and salt mixture, right? And the yeast, of course, is the agent that causes the bread to rise. And in the church, sometimes we say that the yeast is a symbol for the Holy Spirit. You know, it's what enlivens our spiritual life. It's how we know God, just as the yeast makes the bread rise. So the Holy Spirit is the active agent in our Christian life. then as you add in the last bit of your flour, which I just did off camera, then you're going to start to knead the bread by hand. And you're just going to kind of get to the point where you're folding the bread in over itself. And you get, there's bits of flour at the bottom of the bowl. You can kind of sweep those up with your fingers and put them in there. And then it goes from being like really sticky to becoming a very malleable dough. And even though I have some dough sticking to my fingers, you see that it's at the point now where it's really not very sticky. It feels almost like Play-Doh, if you remember when you were a kid. And that's about the consistency you want to get to. And then once you have it to where you can really kind of knead it without it totally sticking to your fingers, you're going to put it just on your countertop. You're going to take your bowl over, and that's a pretty good consistency. If you look at the dough, this is kind of what you want. You want to be able to put your finger in it and take your finger out of it. You want it to slowly fill in that depression, but you don't want it to stick too much to your fingers. It's going to have a little bit of a sticky feeling, but it's not going to cling to your fingers. So you get it on your kneading surface, you grab a handful of flour and just dust your kneading surface with flour, and then you finalize the kneading. Finding that right consistency does take practice. So now that your dough is that consistency you want, that really nice kind of elastic but not too sticky consistency, we're going to cut it into loaves. And you kind of have to look at your cake rounds and just kind of eyeball it. You can adjust the size, but you're going to cut it into loaves. I have enough dough here for about 4 loaves, and the recipe in the description below is going to give you enough dough for 3 to 4 loaves, and it does change from time to time that you do it, so you kind of have to just eyeball it. But as you can see, they're like, I don't know, maybe the size of a softball, maybe a little bigger than a softball is really good. And now they're pretty much the same size. And then you're going to form the loaf. Now, forming the loaf is the part of this process that takes the most practice. So I want you to look at my hands and try and follow that, and just know that the more you do it, one day it'll just click. And whatever you do, it's going to be fine, and it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be your offering to God. Roll it back and then pinch it towards the middle. And roll it back and pinch it towards the middle. And roll it back and pinch it towards the middle. And then, I don't know why I think of it this way, but I think about it kind of like tying a balloon. Then I just kind of bunch it all up together and flip it over. And then you see you have kind of a nice smooth surface, right? And then you're going to go ahead and just a light misting with Pam, or any kind of pan spray, non-stick pan spray, and you're going to drop your loaf right into your pan. Take the loaf and you're going to flatten it into the pan. Just push it with your hand and turn it. And again, you want to get it as flat and as consistent as you can, but it's not an exact science. And then the next thing we'll do once we have these flattened out is we will put the seal. Okay, so now we have our loaf formed. It's in the pan, it's flattened down. And it's time to put the seal in. The Greek word is sfragida. And as we talked about before, you know, the centerpiece, this is the piece that the priest cuts out to use in the Eucharist, represents Christ. It says here, Jesus Christ conquers. These represents the various saints and the categories of angels and saints, and this represents the Virgin Mary, the little triangle here. We want to dust that with the flour so it doesn't stick, because you got to press it in quite firmly. And then Yaya always taught me to make the cross over the loaf. So we say in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We center it best we can and press down firmly. And I'd like to press and then let it rest for a second and then press again, right? And then you want to gently lift it. You don't want to yank it because then you can mess up the seal. But it came out pretty well because we had plenty of flour. And there's a good seal. The other thing Yaya taught me was to poke holes. Now, I don't know why we do this, but that's what we do. And so you can use a toothpick. I mean, I have a thermometer here because that's what we had on hand. Anything that's kind of round and pointed. And now our bread is ready to rise. Okay, now we're ready to let our bread rise. We're pretty much there, almost done. You just need a dry and warm place for your bread to rise. I like to let mine rise in the oven. Sometimes I even turn the oven up to like 150 degrees for like 5 minutes, just so it's a nice warm environment, but you don't have to do that. But I feel that the oven, whether or not you warm it, is the ideal place to let your bread rise. So we just put it in, and then we take a clean dish towel and just cover the bread. Now, of course, you want to make sure that when you turn the oven on, you take the dish towel out, because that would be dangerous. But you cover your bread, and we let it rise. And your bread should double or a little more than double in size, and that takes anywhere between an hour and an hour and 15 minutes. So I go ahead and I set my timer for 1 hour, and then I'll come back to check it. We've had our bread rising. It's been in there about an hour. I find that sometimes it takes as little as 50 minutes, sometimes almost as much as an hour and 20. So you kind of want to look at it and see how it looks. So let's check ours out. Oh yeah, and this is done pretty well. As you can see, it's a little more than doubled in size. The seal is very clear, and you can see too that it has a little bit of a curvature to it. You don't want it to be flat. That shows us that it's risen enough. But I think that these are going to turn out pretty good, I hope. So the last thing to do is to bake the bread. So we put it right back in the oven, and we've taken the dish towel off. So you want to remember to take the dish towel off, because you cover it to rise, but you're going to turn on the oven now. You don't want to have a fire hazard. And this dial is pretty low on this oven here. You're going to turn it to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're going to let it bake for about 45 minutes. So we'll come back in a little bit and see how they turn out. All right, it's been 45 minutes. I'm going to turn off the oven, open her up. It's hot in there, so you got to put on your mitts, right? Or, you know, whatever you have to protect your hands. Oh yeah, and these turned out pretty well, pretty nice. So we're just going to drop them on a towel and let them cool. And they're ready for church on Sunday. So we are really excited about how these turned out. They turned out pretty good. So we hope that you have fun making a Prosforo at home. And we hope you coordinate with your parish priest so you can bring it as offering bread. And we hope that you had fun watching us do it. So may God bless you and maybe keep you safe and healthy.